What's up guys, today what we're going to do is go through a list of items that are worth unlocking for your PVM experience or adventure in RuneScape 3. There's a lot of items that are useful that aren't necessarily core base items. Now by core base items I mean like your weapons and your armor and the main like accessories that you would use normally, like an Essence of Finality. That sort of stuff is not going to be in here as that stuff I've covered in the past as well. But what I'm going to do in this video is go over stuff that is going to be useful as an extra. Some items that will have a unique use in certain places that are going to help you out a lot in your combat and all that sort of good stuff. So in this video, that's what we're going to cover. Hopefully it helps you guys out. Do leave a like if you enjoy. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you learned something new or an item that you didn't have already, then let me know in the comments which one that is. And also if you enjoy the music in this video, head over to my music channel. There is a link in the description to that, and you can listen to that or download it and use it in your videos or streams or whatever for absolutely free. Anyway, let's get started. So we're going to be starting this list off with one of my favorite items in this game, and that's because it's a magic item. Then it's going to be the Gothic Staff. Now, Gothic Staff is an item that is pretty useful to get. I think Irons actually picked this up quite early on as well, as it is one of the better staffs. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is true. But the Gothic Staff has a special attack, which is incredibly useful and will be used all the way to the end game. Eventually, you will pop this into an Essence of Finality, making it even better. But even before you have one of those, it is worth picking one of these up, because like I say, the special attack will reduce the target's defense level by 5%. It also applies a debuff that increases the target's affinity by 2. Affinities basically mean that the combat style you're using will have better accuracy, so not only are you reducing the target's defense, you're also increasing your accuracy, which let me tell you is super useful in a lot of situations. These are used at places like AOD to increase accuracy, they are used at Telos to increase accuracy, and then of course they also do a lot of damage as well, and as it only costs 25% adrenaline, this thing becomes an extra threshold for magic. I still use this in my rotation in magic all the time, and I would highly recommend you do get one if you don't have one already. The next one is kind of similar to the Gothic Staff, and that is going to be a Statius Warhammer. This is an item that is going to be very niche, and it's probably not going to be needed by every single player, although it is kind of nice if you have one as well, as if you are doing things like AOD or you're doing anything that has a high defense rating like Telos for example, or any future bosses where this may be useful, it will lower the defense as well, just like the Gothic Staff, except rather than lowering the defense by 5%, this will lower the opponent's defense by 30%. Not only that, it will also apply a debuff that increases the target's affinity values by 5 for 1 minute. So this is the same as the Gothic Staff, right? Except the levels are a hell of a lot better. So it lowers the target's defense by 30% rather than 5% on the Gothic Staff, and it also increases their affinity values by 5, which means you will be hitting a lot more often. And of course, having a high accuracy at bosses can be incredibly important. Stacking this with the Gothic Staff in some places will give you 100% accuracy. You can use one of these in a Gstaff at Telos to guarantee 100% accuracy rate, meaning when you need to stun at the right time, you don't have to deal with those pesky splashes. Now, these are expensive. They are definitely not cheap. I would recommend putting one in an Essence of Finality if you do have one, but otherwise it still has some use. But popping one of these in an Essence of Finality is what I did, and it's definitely worth having in some situations. Now, the reason I said that not everybody will need one of these is because the buff does share. So if you go to AOD and you have someone who is using a hammer, everybody will benefit off of that. But of course, if you are in a team that does need a hammer, if you have one, then hey, you can be that person. And I do believe, I could be wrong because I don't do much AOD, but I do believe the person using a hammer does get a greater split to cover the costs of it as well. If anyone can confirm that, that'd be great. Next up is going to be a defender. Now, a defender's not exactly something that's uncommon. Everyone knows what a defender is, right? Well, I hope so. And if not, then good. This is good. You want to know what this is. A shield in this game will give you access to different abilities. It'll give you defense abilities, things like resonance, things like reflect, and it will extend things like debilitate, and it does a whole lot of good stuff. But it does reduce the damage that you output, and that is not always a good thing. A defender is going to allow you to use those defense abilities, but still give you access to your dual wield abilities, things like Needle Strike and also your Great Concentrated Blast, as well as not reducing your damage anywhere near as much as a shield. So defenders can be incredibly useful. The downside to using a defender though is that the abilities that you use, your defense abilities, will not be as effective. For example, a resonance will heal for less, a barricade will last less time as well, and all this sort of stuff that you can expect. A reflect will have less duration, and it goes the same sort of way. So absolutely making use of defenders is good in some situations, but every now and again you may want to have a shield with you for some certain mechanics. but there's not many things in the game that I can think of where a shield is more useful than a defender, especially if you pair a defender with Turtling 4, and you can also pair that with the Melatops buff, which you can get from your player on farm, which will increase the duration of your barricade as well. But absolutely grabbing a defender is something that I would recommend everybody does. So if you need to know how to get a defender, just look on the wiki for each one that you need. You have the Calphite ones, which are tier 90, or you have the Zaros ones, which are tier 80. Just search which one you need into Google and which combat style you need, and it will tell you how to make them. Next up is going to be the Salve Amulet E. The Salve Amulet E is kind of only really useful in bossing or PVM rather than just Slayer, because it's good in Slayer as well, at Elite Dungeon 3 as far as I can tell. It could have more use in the future, don't get me wrong, it absolutely could, but this is incredibly useful in ED3 and I'm going to tell you why. The Salve Amulet E basically increases the damage and accuracy for all combat styles to undead monsters such as skeletons or zombies or Taraket, and the blows at Taraket. So if you are someone who does ED3 quite a bit, or you want to get into ED3, having a Salve Amulet E from the Haunted Mine quest, and then the Lair of Tarn Razor Lord mini quest to enchant it, you can absolutely get a massive buff from this, and a 20% accuracy boost is incredibly good. You may see that I don't use this at ED3 and wonder why. It's one, because I'm too lazy to do the switch. Yes, I should use it, but two, I normally camp my Essence of Finality and Soul Split anyway, and that way I can heal up and not have to worry. I'm a very lazy PVMer, but I got one of these just for the same thing in the past before the Essence of Finality, and it is incredibly worth it. It is so good, and a 20% accuracy and damage boost for those targets and for Taraket, going to make your life a lot easier. As mentioned, this also works for Slayer as well if you're doing anything that is undead, so something to keep in mind too. Next up is going to be the Keris. This is one item that I don't have because it is locked behind the Contact quest, which has quite a lot of requirements. That being said, it is incredibly good if you are wanting to do the Calphite King. I guess you could use the Calphite Queen as well, but most of you guys probably aren't going to be struggling too much at the Calphite Queen. The Calphite King is going to be susceptible to this, and it is going to do a lot of damage if you are using the Keris. The Keris is an incredibly strong weapon for the Calphite King. I believe it actually becomes the best in slot, and you can also use the Desert Amulet 3 and 4 to further boost the damage and the hit chance of this weapon. When you're not attacking Calphites, it is only tier 50, but when you are using it against them, it will get a massive power boost and become one of the best weapons you could use. If you're someone who does solo Calphite King, for example, for your Slayer tasks, if you don't have one of these, maybe you should consider grabbing one, as they are really good here. It does take quite a bit of time for questing and stuff, but it is something that I kind of used to wish that I had, and then looked at the quest list and went, probably not. But that being said, this is definitely something worth thinking about if you are doing a lot of Calphite King, going for the log, or that sort of stuff. The next item is the Sunspear. Now, the Sunspear is an item that you get from completing the quest River of Blood, or you need that to be able to use it. Anyway, the Sunspear can be switched between all three combat styles, meaning if you augment this weapon with a Planted Feet perk, you actually only need one for all three combat styles. Well, two, because Planted Feet doesn't work with melee. You can switch this between magic and range whenever you need that Planted Feet version for that combat style, saving you a bit of money on the perk. I also don't use this as well because I just have them on whatever weapons I want to use them on. For example, with magic, I don't want to bring this as well as my wand, my orb, and my staff, so my Planted Feet is just on my main hand wand. It is not best in slot that way, but it's easier for me, and that's what I prefer to do. That being said, if you are someone who is trying to save money, you are trying to work your way up into perks and PVM, the Sunspear is definitely a great thing to use for your Planted Feet switch. Next up is going to be the good old trusty Double Surge Codex. You want to buy a Double Surge Codex at some point because it gives you another surge. Surprise, surprise, it is incredibly useful. Basically, what this is going to do is allow you to stack up 2 charges of Surge. So this will allow you to Surge and then Surge again, which is surprising because it's called Double Surge, and I'm sure that's a little bit surprising, right? No? Okay. Well, Double Surge is incredibly useful. There's not much else I need to say about it. You will use it in a lot of situations to dodge mechanics. If you mistime something, there's that as well. You can get through elite dungeons very quickly. You can travel around the map very quickly, a lot faster than you would have done before, as Surge is a very mobile thing to be able to use. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. So if you don't have Double Surge and you got some extra cash laying around, maybe you should grab one. Next up, we're going to talk about the Adrenaline Urn. The Adrenaline Urn is something that holds your adrenaline up to 1000%. You can charge this from the crystal or in combat if you're on maxed out adrenaline. and basically you can keep the urn in your inventory, and when you go out of combat, it will drain from the urn first, your adrenaline, rather than from your actual adrenaline bar from 100%. This is useful because then when you do go out of combat, you don't end up losing adrenaline. So places like Seryu, when you're phasing onto his back, for example, you're not going to lose any adrenaline jumping up there. And also in other situations like running through elite dungeons, teleporting around, it's just incredibly convenient, but it's also good during fights, for example, like I said, at the phasing between Seryu as well. Now, some people will argue that you could actually just use the Persistent Rage Relic. That's absolutely true. You definitely could do that. What the Persistent Rage Relic will do is at 98 Archaeology, you can use this relic to make sure your adrenaline does not drain out of combat. Full stop. You don't need to charge the urn up or whatever, or the relic up to 1000%. It will just never drain, which is incredibly good, right? But at the same time, if you have the adrenaline urn, this will unlock another space in your relics that you can use something else instead. So you would just want to weigh up whether you would rather have the urn and the different relic, or the inventory space and use the Persistent Rage Relic. So both of these are fine. People prefer to do different things, but it's worth mentioning the adrenaline urn as it's a really useful item. You can get the adrenaline urn from killing Calgarian demons, but let me tell you, it is a rare item. It is a 1 in 1024 drop from Calgarian demons, so it is definitely a rare drop, but you could definitely get one during your Slayer task or something along those lines. Next up are the two items, the Powder of Item Protection or the Portent of Item Protect. These are incredibly useful items for people who have high death costs in PvM and don't use Ring of Death. People like me who think, you know what, I don't die very often, and then you are lying to yourself because you die more often than you probably should. But it's okay, because these items are going to save you a good amount of money on your death cost. What they do is allow you to stack this with the Protect Item Prayer, meaning you can save up to 5 items if you die. So at Death's Office, you can save 5 items rather than just the 3 if you didn't have the prayer on, and you didn't have one of these in the inventory. These do not stack with each other, so you can't get this to 6. You can only get this to 5, so you will have to use the Item Protect and plus one of these. The upside to using the powder over the portent is that it doesn't have to go in your inventory. You just scatter them around, and then you get 30 minutes of buff, where if you die, they will consume that buff and it will save you that item. However, these can be quite expensive in comparison to the portents, so if you want to save some money, you can spare an inventory space to bring a portent of Item Protect with you instead. And like I say, this will be cheaper, but it is going to cost you that inventory space. So if you need that for one bit of extra food to keep you alive, then it's not worth the trade-off. But if you don't need that inventory space, then I would recommend bringing this instead, as it's a lot cheaper, like a hell of a lot cheaper. Those powders can go expensive, and I'm not gonna lie, making this video will probably push the price of those powders up a little bit. I did last time I mentioned them, so just keep that in mind as well. The final thing I'm going to mention, or the final things I'm going to tie together, are the DPS sigils, or the now DPS abilities that you can unlock from the Grand Exchange, and this is going to be the Undead Slayer ability codex and also the Dragon Slayer ability codex as well. These two things are incredibly useful because you can use them in ED2 for the dragons and use it in ED3 for the undead, and what it's going to do is increase the amount of damage you do to those targets dramatically, like a lot. It's going to be a hell of a lot. In fact, specifically, it is 15% for 10 seconds. That's a lot. It's a hell of a lot when you stack it with other stuff as well, like the Salve Amulet mentioned earlier, or even the perks on your armor. The Undead Slayer and the Dragon Slayer perks will also stack with this as well. So you can end up outputting a lot of damage in these dungeons, and it's just coming from abilities like this that don't share a global cooldown. So you can use these whenever you want, and you can stack them up nicely together, and you can deal a lot of damage very quickly. Using this, the Salve Amulet and the Undead Slayer ability, for example, can make Taraket so much easier than if you didn't have them. Don't get me wrong, these aren't incredibly cheap. They are probably sitting around about 140 mil apparently for the Undead Slayer one, and then around about 50 mil for the Dragon Slayer ability codex as well. So they are quite expensive, but they are still worth using, and I would recommend that you do grab one if you're going to have use for them. The Dragon one is good all the way through ED2, like all the way through, because it's all dragons, and the undead one is great for like Taraket and a few things here and there like the skeletons. It can be a pain in the ass, so absolutely worth grabbing. Well, anyway, guys, that is going to bring us to the end of this video, because that was 10 items, and there's probably more that I could think of, so let me know if you want to hear part 2, and I will work on that. If you do enjoy, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you find something new in here, let me know what you found, of course, as mentioned before. Head over to the music channel, link in the description if you enjoy the music. If you want to use it in your streams, no copyright, all that sort of good stuff, your videos, absolutely welcome to. No credit is required, all that sort of good stuff. If you just want to listen to it and download the tracks, they're all there as well. Other than that, thank you to the channel members for the extra support. Your names are on screen right now, of course. You guys help out a hell of a lot, and I always appreciate it very, very much. Otherwise, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate that too, and I will see you all in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye.